Grandview, USA is a great place to grow up. It's got friendly people, wonderful neighbors, concerned parents.
Are you on drugs?
Responsible kids.
Not as bad as it looks, Dad.
It's a great little town. Unless you're a kid with great big dreams.
Scuba diver, dirty driver, a mean mother, international lover.
I gave you the money. Would you buy me a bottle of wine?
Demolition, no competition. Well, the skies are not to raise suspicion.
You're making it with a high school kid?
Calm down.
That's the reason you couldn't go out with me last night, isn't it?
Late at night until your dreams are free. Make your fantasies come true. I steal your heart and I make you love me while you sleep. I'll make love to you.
Damn it, what's wrong with this town anyway?
Nothing. There's all the bull that says you'll never make it. I don't buy it.
Jamie Lee Curtis, C. Thomas Howell, Patrick Swayze. From the director of The Blue Lagoon and Grease. Grandview, USA. It's a great place to start from when you're going places.
Hello, I'm Katie, and welcome to Retromade, your pop culture rewind. We're going to head back to August of 1984 for the dramedy Grandview, USA, featuring a youthful Jamie Lee Curtis alongside the always delightful Patrick Swayze. This film, I would say, captures the essence of small-town life in America. It blends romance, comedy, and a bit of drama. It explores the intertwined lives of very quirky residents. It did not make a splash at the box office, but it's still a nostalgic look at youthful dreams and aspirations in a small town, which is perfect for our pop culture rewind today. If you're new to the show, welcome. I do sometimes do solo shows, as you will see me today or hear me today. There's just a few episodes left in season 1 of our Ultimate Everymen, Kurt Russell and Patrick Swayze. Stick around to see what's left. There's a couple surprises in there that we haven't gotten to yet. But yeah, if you're new, Retromade, I cover retro movies along with the TV, music, and other pop culture of the time. Most of the time with another co-host guest. If you have been with me this whole time along my journey, into the retro goodness of the 80s and 90s movies of Kurt Russell and Patrick Swayze in season 1, thank you for tuning in as always. And here's your reminder. If you have not provided a rating or a review, please do so. Please, please. And YouTube, are you subscribed yet? Head on over. RetromadePodcast. Okay. So we're going to open the time capsule from August 1984. This movie came out August 3rd, which is a week earlier than another movie that we've already covered, Red Dawn, also with Patrick Swayze and C. Thomas Howell, which we'll get to. So literally a week apart. We've already covered what was happening in terms of Billboard hits from a musical perspective, news and events from this time, and TV, both some premieres, finales, and what was topping those Nielsen ratings. However, I would like to call attention to a particular notable finale from this season, 1984, Three's Company. This was its final season. And so I think that Three's Company deserves a little love. So I'm going to expand on it right now. And I hope you'll join me on this little ride.
Okay, Chrissy, I'll get in the tub with you, then we can get it on. The first time I've ever done this.
Maybe so, but girls are better at this than boys.
Come on, Chrissy, a little less talk and a little more action, okay?
Okay, you do your part, I'll do mine. I don't think it'll reach.
Of course not. You've got to unfold it first.
Mr. Furley,
you doing?
Never mind what I'm doing. What are they doing?
Nothing.
Oh, don't give me that. I heard. Rub-a-dub-dub, come hop in my tub. I heard all of it.
You heard all of what?
What is going on in here?
Yeah, I was just asking you. How'd you get your clothes on so fast?
What?
What? Don't act so innocent. I know what's what. But how'd you get your clothes on so fast?
Excuse me, what is he talking about?
I don't know.
Rub-a-dub-dub, come hop in my tub.
What are you talking about?
Jack, are you gonna help me or not?
Aha! How'd you get your clothes on so fast?
What?
Another innocent. I know what you were doing.
Putting up a shower curtain?
That's right. You're...
Interestingly, Three's Company, I'm very familiar with it, but it was really before my time. But we'll get into maybe why I remember it so well. But I'm sure you've all seen it a bazillion times. It's iconic for a number of reasons. But Three's Company, classic sitcom. I love sitcoms, so maybe that's where part of my love for it comes from. It centers on three roommates, Jack Tripper, Janet Wood, and Chrissy Snow, aka Christmas Snow. Yes, that's her real full name. They share an apartment in Santa Monica, California. Jack is a culinary student, and it's just wild, the 70s, because it started in the 70s, because it's similar to Bosom Buddies in this way. Jack has to pretend to be gay to appease the prudish landlord, Mr. Roper, because he disapproves of mixed gender living arrangements. Like, they're all adults. It's just wild that they had to do that anyway. And this is even in California, but the show's humor does revolve around misunderstandings, which reminds me of that Friends episode where they're watching an episode of Three's Company. And Phoebe's like, "Oh, is this one where there's a misunderstanding?" Chandler's like, yeah. And she's like, "Oh, I've already seen this one." And he just looks at her funny because they're all around that. Anyway, it's very slapstick comedy, which was a sign of its time, and quite a few pretty risque innuendos, particularly of the time. And cast members did change over the years, including the landlords, including the blonde roommate. But the core of the show, the dynamic of mischief, friendship, and farcical situations did remain throughout the whole series, making it a beloved TV staple. I don't know if you guys knew that Jack originally lived at the YMCA before moving in with Janet and Chrissy. Norman Fell, we'll get into the cast, who they are, but he played Mr. Roper. And the early seasons, he would say something like after he made a joke, he would kind of smile and look at the camera knowingly, like we're all in on the joke, at the expense of another character, usually his wife, Mrs. Roper. But so this was an example of breaking the fourth wall, which wasn't done a lot at this time. So I guess it was his idea to do that. And it's kind of the signature of the show. It was an ABC show, ran from 1977 to 1984. That's 8 seasons, 172 episodes, which I think is wild because 8 seasons now would be max like 80 episodes. Nothing would go 8 seasons now, seemingly, but there's 10 episodes a season if we're lucky on shows now. So it was literally twice that or more back in the day. It has a 7.5 on IMDb, which is pretty good. It was a major hit when it first aired on ABC. It consistently ranked in the top 10 of those Nielsen ratings, which I bring up every Retromade episode. I would say not all seasons, though, particularly, it took a minute to get its footing. And then at its peak, it was the second most watched show in America during its 3rd season. So that was its peak. So the season of 1978 to 1979, most watched show in America, second most watched, I'm sorry. Again, like that combination of provocative plot lines, the slapstick humor, very likable characters made it a pop culture phenomenon. And though it did kind of decline in ratings in later seasons, they kept switching up the cast. But despite that, it did remain popular throughout its entire run and became cherished in syndication, which is where I found it, in syndication. So we'll talk about at the end where you can watch Three's Company, but I remember it fondly. Clearly, I wasn't around for its original run on ABC, but I remember watching it fondly And only now when I watch it, I'm like, oh, it seemed odd. I'm like, why are they having to lie about, I don't know, all the little things about, Jack was such a horn dog and Larry. And I never really understood why Mr. Roper never wanted to have sex with his wife. It was wild. And then we'll get to when Mr. Furley comes along. Don Knotts is wild. So anyway, Three's Company. I bet you everyone knows, even if they've never seen an episode, they know if somebody says, come and knock on our door, they know, right? So it's iconic. And I love that. I mean, how can you not smile when you hear the theme song?
Come and knock on our door. Come and knock on our door. We've been waiting for you. We've been waiting for you. Where the kisses are hers and his. Three's Company too. Come and dance on our floor. Come and dance on our floor. Take a step that is new. Take a step that is new. We've a lovable space that needs your face. Three's Company too. You'll see that life is a ball again. Laughter is calling for you. Down at our rendezvous. Down at our rendezvous. Three's Company too.
So I bet you did not know who composed it, though. Joe Raposo composed that. And he composed several iconic songs throughout his career, particularly for children's TV. He wrote the beloved theme song for Sesame Street. Also, C is for Cookie, and It's Not Easy Being Green, which was famously performed by Kermit the Frog. So all the same composer. Three's Company was created by like a trio, Don Nickel, Michael Ross, and Bernie West. They adapted the show from a British sitcom, Man About the House. Did you guys know that? It was originally a British show. This trio is also known for their successful writing and production work on, a couple little shows like All in the Family, which was groundbreaking sitcom, which tackled social issues, as well as The Jeffersons, which was a spinoff of All in the Family. So there's this creation team, this writing team, they did set the tone for this, at the time, this farcical style of comedy. If you think back to shows of its time, that kind of became, mistaken identities, misunderstandings became the hallmark of this show. And it was a hit, contributing to the development of the entire genre. The late 70s and early 80s had a lot of that farcical style. So we can kind of thank Don Nickel, Michael Ross, and Bernie West for that. Okay. I think it's funny looking at the ages because, so the roommates were playing people. They're supposed to be in their early to mid 20s, right? So like Jack's still in school, they're just getting out on their own, but they were all at least 10 years, quite a bit older than that. So John Ritter plays Jack Tripper. He was 29 in 1977 when he started playing Jack Tripper. So yeah, a little older than in the early 20s. And he was only 54 when he died in 2003. I thought this was really interesting. I mean, he goes hand in hand with Jack Tripper, John Ritter does. But Billy Crystal was considered for the role. And I guess I can see that, but I'm glad we had John Ritter. I like him as Jack. Then Joyce DeWitt plays Janet Wood. She was 28 at the time. Suzanne Summers plays Chrissy Christmas Snow, and she was 31. So she was the oldest of our original trio. And they're all, again, supposed to be playing in their early to mid 20s. Now, she was in seasons 1 through 5. We'll get to some of the other blonde roommates in a second. And then Larry is sort of their so he's played by Richard Klein. And I didn't even know he had a last name in the show, but Larry's last name is Dallas, I guess. And Richard Klein was 33 at the time. And I think I always assumed he was a little bit older than the others because he lived upstairs, or I don't know, he lived in the same complex, and he lived alone, so he was maybe a little further in his career, whatever he was. But he has this used car salesman, Slick Rick style about him. I liked Larry, but man, if I thought he was so much older. Again, we talk about this all the time on these shows. People just looked older. I don't think they looked like they were, I know they were older. They were all approximately 30 instead of 23, but they don't look 23 at all. They look like they're 35. And then Larry looks like he's 45. But at any rate, that's wild. Norman Fell, we talked about him already. He plays Stanley Roper. He was 53 at the time. And he and Audra Lindley, who plays his wife, Helen Roper, who was 59. So the Ropers were in the first 3 seasons. And then the storyline was they got a spinoff show called The Ropers. I think it only lasted like 1 or 2 seasons. But then Don Knotts comes in to be the new landlord because his brother Bart bought the complex. And so now Ralph manages it. So Ralph Furley, Mr. Furley, he is the landlord from seasons 4 through 8. The year was 1980 when he came in, and he was 56 at the time. Again, watching this, when I see Norman Stanley Roper or Mr. Furley, I think they look like they're well into their 60s, but they're not. They weren't. All right. Well, then we will get into why Suzanne Summers was replaced a little bit later, but there was a little bit of musical blonde roommates. In fact, I think Nick at Night even did a cute little 3 blonde roommates or something like that instead of 3 blind mice. Yeah. So cute. But I bet you guys forgot about the one in the middle. So everybody remembers Chrissy. Most people probably remember Terry, who finished the show. But there was one in between. And her name is Cindy Snow. And she is supposed to be in TV land. She's Chrissy's cousin. And she's played by Jenna Lee Harrison. I think she is supposed to be a college student in the show because she is younger and in real life. So she comes in 1981 and she was only 23 at the time. But even then, yeah, she looked like she was 28. It's just wild. So yeah, so Jenny Lee Harrison played Cindy Snow. And so she kind of carried on a little bit of that dumb blonde bimbo, sort of like silly, haha, look at me. I'm just similar to Chrissy. So Jenny Lee Harrison was a former LA Rams cheerleader, and she was well liked by her coworkers, but her inexperience and a big drop in ratings, I guess, led them to search for yet another person to fill the 3rd roommate position. And another famous blonde was considered, or a finalist, supposedly, for this role. Anyone? Heather Locklear, I guess, was considered for Cindy. But we ultimately end up with the role Terry Alden. She's a nurse. That's the final blonde roommate. She comes in for seasons 6 through 8. And so she's 29 in 1982. And she's played by Priscilla Barnes. Terry is played by Priscilla Barnes. And I don't like seeing this, but she said that her years on this show were the unhappiest in her professional career. Yikes. She said she almost quit as soon as she was cast because she did not like the backstage atmosphere. So we'll get into that a little bit more in a second, but yikes. She's a consummate professional, though, because I loved her. Spoiler alert, she's my favorite blonde roommate. I loved Terry. Or maybe it's just those are the ones I'm more familiar with. The later years, I don't know. Anybody? Okay, who's your favorite blonde roommate? Then we have one more kind of regular. She was originally not a regular, but then towards the end, she did become a season regular in season 4. The character of Lana. She was supposed to be a little bit older. I think she also lived in the complex, and she had the hots for Jack and was always kind of trying to get her claws in Jack. And for whatever reason, I don't know if he wasn't interested. I don't know why, because she was very pretty. Anyway, she's played by Anne Wedgeworth. And so she comes in season 4, 1980. She was 46 at the time, which is interesting because she probably actually looks like a 46-year-old. Yeah, she's probably the only one that looks her age, but like a good 46. All right. I've kind of alluded to. So why was Chrissy Snow, Suzanne Summers replaced? Well, there's a famous feud. I'm sure you guys have heard about it. I'm sure you've heard tons of different stories. I think there was like a behind the scenes movie or a mini series about it as well. But I mean, I could literally go on for an hour about this, but I won't. I will just quickly try and summarize that. So there's a big juicy feud, behind the scenes drama it was sparked by apparently Suzanne Summers' demand for equal pay, God forbid, with John Ritter in 1980. So she becomes the breakout star of the show, but she was being paid much less. So she wanted her salary bumped up to match Ritter's $150,000 per episode. Producers refused that, offering her just a token raise instead. In retaliation, she began skipping tapings, showing up late. Chrissy was then sidelined into a brief. There was like maybe a season where she was either on the phone or just remote scenes or written off those episodes entirely for a little while. And so tensions with co-stars, especially, I guess, Joyce DeWitt, playing Janet, ran really high. And so Summer's exit left a really bitter legacy. However, she and DeWitt did reconcile decades, not years later, decades later. And I guess the feud wasn't just about money. It did expose cracks in the relationships between the cast and crew. Summer's bold pay demands were seen as a betrayal, particularly by Joyce DeWitt and John Ritter, who kept their distance from her after this fallout. And producers felt like she was becoming too demanding and that her husband, Alan Hemmel, who managed her career, was accused of fueling this conflict, like kind of pushing her to ask for more and be more demanding and leave afterwards. And so she was ultimately fired and new characters rotated into her place. And, there's, this clash, what's really true, what's not true, lots and lots of stuff. Suzanne Summers has referred to the day that she got fired from Three's Company as the day my career ended in interviews. But she did go on, Thigh and what was the show, Step by Step. But yeah, I mean, I think she probably would have had a bigger career had this not happened. But that's the juicy goss on the big Three's Company feud. Not so happy campers behind the scenes. But the show is super popular and it got a ton of awards. So let's see. In terms of Emmys, John Ritter won Outstanding Lead Actor in a Comedy Series in 1984, and he was also nominated for that same category in 81 and 78. The whole show was nominated in 78. And Jerry Davis was nominated for editing in 1978 also. Golden Globes, Ritter, again, won Best Actor in 1984, nominated in 80 and 79. Norman Fell, Mr. Roper, won for supporting in 79. The show was nominated in 79. Suzanne Summers was actually nominated for Best Actress in 1979. And Audra Lindley was nominated for Best Supporting in 79. Also, People's Choice got a favorite comedy in 81. And then I didn't know this could happen, but I guess there was a tie for People's Choice Award. I did not know what year. Sorry about that. But with The Love Boat, I didn't know there were tie situations. That's interesting. And then I quite like the TV Land Awards because they're fun little categories. So Don Knotts was nominated in both 2003 and 5 for Favorite Nosy Neighbor. That was a category. Oh my God, the bar. You guys, the bar that they went to was called the Regal Beagle. And it was nominated in 2005 for Most Happen and Hangout TV Land Award. Norman Fell and Audra Lindley also in 2004 for Favorite Cantankerous Couple. That was the category. Richard Klein for Hippest Fashion in 2003, and Don Knotts for Favorite Fashion, his ascot in 2005. Oh, TV Land. That's fun. Okay, so yeah, I did talk about the spinoffs. So the Ropers, where'd they go? I think they were upset because they probably would have rather stayed on Three's Company. But at first, it seemed like a great idea to give them their own spinoff show. Their dynamic was funny. But so they were promised by the ABC network that if their show didn't make it past its first season, their spots were secure for a return to Three's Company. But because their spinoff lasted a season and a half, ABC was not obliged to bring them back. Do you think they did that on purpose? So they were permanently replaced by Don Knotts. Boy, what a cutthroat business, eh? Then, do you guys remember there was a spinoff for Jack's character called Three's a Crowd? I've seen a few episodes. I didn't really get into it, but he is engaged or married. Yeah, the final episode of the series didn't air until the beginning of the 84-85 season when it served as the lead-in to its spinoff Three's a Crowd. It was planned at the start of the final season. The producers tried to keep it a secret from the rest of the cast, but Joyce DeWitt accidentally walked in on the auditions for the part of Vicky, the fiance or the girlfriend or wife of Jack. And that caused tension on the set between Ritter and the rest of the cast, who were disappointed that the series would essentially continue without them and how Ritter was keeping it from them. So God, just lots of perceived backstabbing, which is kind of sad because then if you know that, I don't know, it kind of puts a little stain on the show. But I try and just watch it for what it is, just lighthearted fun. There's a couple of trivia bit that are interesting about Three's Company. There were actually 3 different addresses given for the apartment throughout the seasons, which is, I don't know why they wouldn't just keep that consistent, but none of them were real addresses. We talked about Chrissy's name being Christmas Snow. Well, her full name, and I don't remember where we find this out, but it's Christmas Noel Snow. Wow. In the show's opening, the beginning of the 6th season, there's a toddler. I love the opening sequence. Like they're walking through different areas. They're on a sailboat. They're at the zoo. A toddler walks up to Joyce DeWitt as she's feeding a goat. And that toddler is Jason Ritter, John's son. I didn't know that. That's fun. And then the brunette, again, same in that opening sequence. There's a brunette walking by the beach and Jack turns to look at her and falls off. He's riding a bike and he falls off. That person is Suzanne Summers in a wig. Joyce DeWitt refused to ever be shown bare-legged. I don't know why. And always wore pantyhose when her legs were visible. And yes, I remember that. She'd wear really shorty shorts, but she'd have pantyhose. I always thought that was weird. I just maybe thought that was like the style, or I don't know what people did. But her commitment to hosiery earned her an endorsement deal with the Legs brand pantyhose. All right. I did not know this. I thought that Mrs. Roper's hair was Mrs. Roper's hair. It's not. Audra Lindley wore a red curly wig to be Helen Roper. Her natural hair is blonde and straight. The exterior shots of the Roper's apartment was an actual corner apartment house in Santa Monica. In a Cafe Mom video segment hosted by Suzanne Summers, Joyce DeWitt said that John Ritter had affairs with a lot of his female co-stars. Both DeWitt and Summers said they were unaware at the time. I mean, shocking. If you rewatch it now, a lot of the girlfriend characters, you'll be like, oh, that's so-and-so. Oh, that's so-and-so. I remember one time it was Maggie Seaver from Growing Pains. I'm like, oh my God, yeah, she was one of his dates in an episode. I remember. Yeah, there's a lot of those instances. I'm not saying that they had an affair. I don't know. I'm just saying I remembered her. In the 1979 episode, The Party, it's become iconic because when Chrissy danced with Mr. Roper sans bra, bouncing around and jiggling, she became the symbol for what is known as Jiggle TV, exemplified in shows like Three's Company, Soap, Charlie's Angels, Fantasy Island, and The Love Boat. I don't know if they still, that term I don't think is still used, but I guess it was a whole thing. Yeah, kind of cheap, but whatever. Big shocker. Big shocker. All right, well, Three's Company. I grew up with reruns. I think that the show feels like a warm hug. It's like this blend of humor, misunderstandings, quirky characters, and navigating life together. And among the blondes, like I said, Terry stood out to me. Her charm and wit added a fresh dynamic to the trio, in my opinion. And we cannot forget about Mr. Furley. He's my favorite of the landlords. His eccentricities and comedic timing provided a delightful contrast to the more traditional Roper, making every episode feel like a new adventure in their small apartment. And the laughter, lighthearted escapades, underlying friendships remind me of the simple joys of life. Now, isn't that what it's all about? I think, again, the warm hug, the feeling like that that apartment. The show not only entertained, it created extremely lasting memories, making it a classic in my heart. And if you have not revisited it in a while, I do highly recommend diving back into the antics of Jack, Janet, and Chrissy and all of their unforgettable adventures. And you can do that pretty easily because it's very widely available to watch. It airs on Pluto, IFC, and Antenna TV. And then the following, if you have a subscription, Philo, Sling, and DirecTV. All right. Well, shall we get into Grandview, USA? Like I said, it premiered 1 week before Red Dawn, which is wild because there are two of the exact same characters in this movie. It's rated R. IMDb is a little lower than, we've been in the mid 5s to mid 6 lately with this, the last several movies that we've been covering. 5.5 we have for Grandview, USA. I bet most of you have not seen this, so here's a little synopsis. With only 1 week left before he graduates high school in the small Middle Western community of Grandview, the 18-year-old dreamer, Tim Pearson, is itching to renounce an uninspiring scholarship, stand up to his despotic father, and pursue a career in oceanography away from home. However, before long, an unexpected meeting with the struggling 27-year-old owner of the town's demolition derby track on the other side of the tracks, Michelle, Mike, Cody, and the Speedrome's king, Ernie Slam Webster, will bring Tim one step closer not only to his aspirations, but also love. But has anyone ever spread his wings away from Grandview, USA? That is different, right? It's definitely a different movie. I hadn't even heard of it before. And I just remember, because one of the first movies I covered on the show was Skate Town, USA, also with Patrick Swayze. It was his first movie role, and that was from 1979. And it's just really, I don't know, I'm like, oh, he had a Skate Town, USA and a Grandview, USA. And they're both strange. At any rate, Randall Kleiser was the director, and he also directed really good movies: Grease, The Blue Lagoon, Flight of the Navigator, and White Fang. Writers, actually, it's just the one writer here, Ken Hickson, and he also wrote Inventing the Abbots and City by the Sea, but he directed Mr. Mom with Michael Keaton. Love that movie. All right, so Jamie Lee Curtis in this, you guys, she's very young, and her name is Mike. I mean, technically her name is Michelle, but she goes by Mike Cody. That's Jamie Lee Curtis. Then we have C. Thomas Howell as the 18-year-old. Thank God he's 18, as we will get into. Tim Pearson. And Patrick Swayze plays Ernie Slam Webster. Now, those two were, like I said, they were in Red Dawn a week later, and also The Outsiders together. 3 movies in a really close period of time together, which is interesting because, I don't know, it's just really interesting. Anyway, then we have a Jennifer Jason Leigh in an extremely different role for her. Like, I gotta say, I was really surprised to see who she played in this. She plays Candy Webster, and that's Patrick's wife. Yeah, they're married. Yeah. But she's cheating on him the whole time. And we talked about Jennifer Jason Leigh. You all know her, but she was in Backdraft with Kurt. So Candy's cheating, and her boyfriend that she's cheating, well, I don't know why he would cheat on Patrick Swayze, but his name's Troy in the movie, and he's played by Donnie Vinton. And he actually had a small role in The Godfather Part 2. And he was also in Crybaby with Johnny Depp. And then Bob Cody, Mike's uncle, is played by William Wyndham. He played the president. Well, actually, so he kind of looks familiar, but his credits go way far back. I think you guys would think he was a familiar actor. He has 257 acting credits, so he's in a ton of stuff. Most notably, I would say he played the president in Escape from Planet of the Apes from 1971. And he was in To Kill a Mockingbird from 1962, playing Mr. Gilmer. Can't quite make it up. I have seen that movie, but it's been a minute, so I don't recall who that is. And then we have Betty. She helps run the Speedway. At first, I thought maybe she was her aunt, but I don't think she is. The actress's name is Carol Cook. She has roles in 16 Candles and American Gigolo. Emmett Walsh, he's literally in everything, and we've talked about him several times before. He plays Mr. Clark, who is Tim's prom date, Bonnie. He plays her father. We talked about him in the Best of Times episode as well as the Silkwood episode. So it's hard to say though, because it's M, the initial, and then Emmett Walsh. Mr. Pearson, Tim's dad, is played by Ramon Bieri. He looks very familiar, but he's not well known. Bonnie, the prom date, is played by Elizabeth Gorsey, and she is also in some 80s classics. She plays Tina in Teen Wolf and Wendy Jo in Footloose. So that's Elizabeth Gorsey. And Mike has a mentally challenged brother named Cowboy in the movie, and he's played by John Philbin. Yes, you all know John Philbin. He's very young in this, and I'm like, oh my God, he looks familiar. And I didn't put two and two together until afterwards. But yeah, John Philbin. He's pretty well known, most notably playing Amos in Children of the Corn, Nathaniel in Point Break, and Tom McLaury in Tombstone. And then we have both John and Joan Cusack in little bit parts. I don't even know what characters. I think they play brother and sister in the movie, but they're just some townspeople, I think. But yeah, the music here is phenomenal. I mean, let me take that back. I don't really think I remember a lot about the music, but the composer is very well known. His name is Thomas Newman, and he also scored The Shawshank Redemption, I think is the number one IMDb movie. I'm pretty sure. The Green Mile, Finding Nemo, Cinderella Man, the HBO series 6 Feet Under, which that music was good. Also, the show is really good, and a lot of others. So he's been nominated for 15 Academy Awards, but he hasn't won any. So anyway, that's him. They spent $5 million on this movie and did not quite squeak that back. 4.7 in box office. So like I said, I hadn't even heard of this movie. You have to let me know, you guys, if you've A, heard of it, and B, seen it. All right. So very reminiscent of the time, it's early to mid 80s. It opens with this all-American small town life scene, very wholesome, and just it's quite sweet. So then we meet Tim Pearson, who is our Grandview High School senior. He actually has aspirations for oceanography in Florida, so he is a valedictorian, and so he has a scholarship to ISU. So they must be in Illinois, and he wants to turn down his scholarship and go to Florida instead. I don't know. He says he wants to be the next Jacques Cousteau. So we see him in the movie scuba-ing in his bathtub and in the local gross lake and pond. And it's just catfish in there. It's a landlocked Midwestern town. So he's like, get me out of here. And then there's some cute things when we meet our characters that are major retro alerts. So for example, he watches MTV in his room on this teeny tiny tube TV, and it's on a TV cart. Do you guys remember those? You don't see that anymore. We also get these really strange, there's 2 or 3 of them. They're not dream sequences. I think they're imagination sequences of him, working out what he's thinking or feeling in a music video, and the characters that we know are, and it's different. It's interesting for sure. And then his mom, we see her in the living room. Again, it's bigger than his room TV, but back in the day, TVs in the living room were pretty small still. And she's watching Richard Simmons as she aerobicizes. So very early to mid 80s. Love it. Okay, so it's prom time. He's a senior. It's prom. His date's name is Bonnie, and he borrows his dad has this brand new shiny Cadillac. And he's like, they make a big deal about don't scratch the car. Be careful with the car. The car. So we clearly can see something's going to happen to the car. Yeah. So at prom, they're like parked in this, like right by a pond in a muddy area. And they're making out in the back seat. And it sinks in the mud and goes into the pond. What a dipshit. So that's when we meet Mike, AKA Jamie Lee. She gets rescued by Mike, who's way cooler this prom date. She's pretty cool, but she's very androgynous a little bit. She just wears jeans and like a flannel, and she's got a short, unattractive haircut. But she knows her way around a toolbox and the demolition derby. And he's, starting to get the hots for her. She owns this speedrome. They call it the speedrome in the movie. And I take it that her family has had this in the family for quite some time, and she's having a hard time keeping up with repairs and stuff like that. So they keep trying to, like, all the property around the speedrome has been bought up by this developer, and she's the holdout, and that kind of becomes a thing in a little bit. Well, so we're at the speedrome. We meet Slam the Ram Webster, aka Patrick Swayze. So he wins the derby. Like, he's a derbier because he has to get his mind off of the fact that his wife's cheating on him. He makes a scene, it's like out in the open. Everybody knows it. She doesn't even really try and hide it. He smashes this guy's car. The guy gets shot in the foot. It's a whole thing. Just really quickly, I always have to go over my Patrick. So it's the early 80s Patrick Swayze. So his hair situation, as always, it kind of deserves its own credit, but it's the early 80s. And so it's sort of that, not overly done, but it's a little that early 80s kind of feathered, but short hair that looks good on no one except for Patrick Swayze. Again, same with the mullet that he'll bring out. He'll haul that out in a few years. But right now it's the short hair, the early 80s version of hair. And I think you guys can picture it. It's longer, it's short, but it's like longer than Jamie Lee's in this movie. She has a really bad haircut. I don't know. But anyway, sometimes he pulls it off, as he does with everything, because he is Patrick. And again, okay, so because he's Patrick and, they don't make a lot of money. Clearly, money is more important to her than looks because she's cheating with somebody not nearly as attractive, and her husband's hot. I don't know why you would cheat on him, but she does. Candy. Her name says it all. If your wife's name is Candy, she's probably cheating on you. I'm kidding for all of you named Candy out there. It's just, you get what I'm trying to say. And then so we learn that in high school back in the day, Slam and Mike, Jamie Lee, so Patrick and Jamie Lee, liked each other. But Jamie Lee pretty quickly got married. And she's not married now. So she's divorced. And they literally say in the show, one of them, I forget who it is, refers to her. She is 27. And she is referred to, I guess in the early 80s in the Midwest, at 27. You are an old maid if you're not married. So she's divorced, old maid. That's what they call her. She's 27. This is wild. So anyway, she needs $10,000 to fix the speedway or it's going to get shut down. Like I was saying, the developers. And it turns out, so Tim's dad is the county commissioner. He's part of it. Tim finds this out. He finds these plans to build a country club with the land. And so Tim is pissed that his dad is part of this because now he's developed this friendship and crush on Mike, and she's teaching him how to derby. So he's upset by this. He comes to Mike's trailer, upset, and they talk and get something to eat, and they end up having sex. He's 18. Gross. He's a high school kid. Ew. I don't like this at all. Plus, she has already got this like budding romance with Patrick Swayze's character. They were supposed to go out to dinner that night. And she ends up sleeping with the high school kid. And then, you guys, a sweet Slam shows up at her trailer in the morning with a bag of groceries to make her breakfast. And he finds out, oh, there's a high school kid in bed with her. Can you imagine this poor man What in the actual fuck? He leaned on her and trusted her after he's like, "Hey, my life sucks. My wife's cheating on me." And, she's like, "Oh, well, we're friends. Like, oh, maybe we could have dinner, blah, blah, blah." And now you sleep with this teenager? I I mean, I don't know. I don't know, you guys. Yeah, I don't know. They do. Okay, I won't spoil it. So then now there's like this. So now they're both into A, Mike, and B, derbying. And so there's this high stakes competition. So Tim's in it. Tim and Slam go head to head at the derby. Slam gets his revenge after the derby. I mean, obviously, it kind of appears as though he's going after Tim on purpose, but he's not. So Mike kind of gets mad. Slam then goes back to his house where he just cannot win, Slam. He goes back to his house where his wife is in bed with her boyfriend. Literally, he is like either tied or handcuffed to the bed. And Slam finally gets his revenge. He's just continuing to see his wife flaunt this boyfriend in his face. He literally bulldozes the house down with them in it after he smashes her VW Bug. How 80s is that? So as they're experiencing this bulldozer come through the house, they're like, "What the hell?" She proceeds to leave in what her little nightie or whatever she's wearing and leaves her boyfriend tied to the bed to be bulldozed. What a treat this Candy is. Yeah, I was like, "Oh, finally, you go." I mean, I'm not like, let's not do that, but I don't know. It was finally like, this poor guy. You can put your head on my shoulder, Slam. All right, well then there's a little bit of a twist at the end. So Mike and Tim discover the speedway has been burned down. So what are we thinking is probably happening, right? We're probably thinking, "Oh shit, like the towns, the people who wanted to buy it, something along those lines, like they're forcing her hand, a little nefarious shit going on like that." But no. It's courtesy of Cowboy, Mike's mentally challenged brother, and a missing gas cap. He purposefully didn't put the gas cap on something. And it turns out he did that because Mike has been trying to find all these ways to raise money to try and save the Speedway by not selling it. So she does this because she had to sell a bunch of junkyard cars, but Cowboy kind of considered those his cars and she didn't talk to him about it. So he said he did that because they took his cars away. Aw, nothing like a little arson to spice up this already super strange storyline, but it's kind of sad. So now Mike decides she is going to sell the speed. She's like, "Well, fuck it then. I'm going to sell the Speedway to Tim's dad." So now all of a sudden, no more love triangle. Like Tim's cool with, I now all of a sudden Mike and Slam are just going to be together. And so she decides to sell the Speedway to Tim's dad so that she can start a life with Slam together. And then we see Tim, he's on a bus to Chicago to go to college. He didn't get his wish. He has to take, God forbid, he has to take the scholarship to go to college. But that's not what he wants to do, right? So that's where his heart is. And so this was really sweet. Mike, it's always hard for me to say her name is Mike, and Slam, they somehow get the bus to pull over. He comes out and they give him the car that they're driving in and the money that she obtained by selling the Speedway. So they give it to Tim for his trip to Florida so that he can go pursue his dream in Florida and become the next Jacques Cousteau. And then Mike and Slam, they can still build a life together in this little town and, just have a happy, regular, small town life together. And so they're officially a couple. There's this parade, summertime in Grandview, USA. So they're just, off marching together into their future while Tim's left to chase the ocean waves. It's a very classic small town closure. So that is Grandview, USA, you guys. Couple little pieces of trivia thought you guys might find interesting before we close. It apparently is the first feature film of production company Ocelot Productions, one of only 4 CBS theatrical projects greenlit for production in the 1983 year. And they looked at about 40 different towns across the Midwest before setting on filming the entire picture in the American state of Illinois in the cities of Pontiac and Fairbury. You know the song She's Like the Wind that was in Dirty Dancing? Patrick wrote it. Patrick sang it, right? Well, that was 1987 that movie was in, okay? This is, what is this? 1984? Yeah. So the song She's Like the Wind, originally written by Patrick for Grandview, U.S.A. This is a movie apparently, supposedly, as a love theme for the characters played by him and Jamie Lee Curtis. But it was scrapped because the comedic and somewhat raunchy nature of the film. The track would later eventually be used 3 years later in Swayze's film Dirty Dancing, 1987. But you listeners, if you've been paying attention, do you remember when we talked about in the Youngblood episode that he shopped it around for that as well? Remember we talked about, Rob Lowe talked about him coming to him trying to use it in that movie too? Patrick, I love you. I love it. But man, he really shopped this around. I'm glad it was meant for Dirty Dancing. Definitely not Grand. What a waste it would have been in this movie. All right. So the Demolition Derby part of it was a movie set construction which actually built and filmed on a baseball field, and it cost $300,000. A few casting what ifs. Tim Pearson, played by C. Thomas Howell, which this might be a hot take, but there's nothing wrong. I don't dislike him, but he's always flat. He's always a character that I'm like, he could easily be swapped with someone else. And I think it's sort of like he did a bunch of stuff, maybe not a bunch, like a handful of things in like 83, 84, 85, and that's it. And I think that's why. I don't know why they thought he's not without talent. It's just he's so I don't know. I don't think he has star power, and I don't know, he was given a lot of chances to become one and just didn't for whatever reason. Anyway, that's my hot take on C. Thomas Howell. But he played Tim Pearson, but Kevin Costner, I guess, was offered the role, which I think would have been better. I'm not like a huge Costner fan, but like I said, I'm not a big C. Thomas Howell fan either. So Jamie Lee Curtis was not who they originally cast as Mike Cody. Apparently, Cher was originally the lead female role. And according to an article published in August 23rd, 1983 issue of The Hollywood Reporter, there were creative differences between Cher and the producers over the casting of the 2 male leads in the movie, Patrick and C. Thomas Howell. Now, I'm on your side, Cher, with the C. Thomas Howell, but Patrick, I don't know. But we talked about Cher because she was in Silkwood with Kurt. Yeah. So anyway, and then you know how I mentioned John and Joan Cusack were in this? Well, this is one of about 10 feature films that the real life brother and sister John and Joan Cusack have both appeared in as cast members. Yeah, that's funny. All right, you guys, Grandview, USA. Again, who's seen it? Who's even heard of it? Anyone? Let me know. Don't forget, you can email me if you would like to with comments, questions, etc. RetromadePodcast@gmail.com. Or you can always leave comments on the YouTube version. I like that. This movie was definitely an interesting one, a bit out of left field. It is time to get off of this quirky ride and drive ourselves back into the present day reality. Until next time, be kind, rewind.